The room hummed with energy, bright blue light flickering from the circular metal structure in the center. Dr. Adrian Carter adjusted his gloves, heart pounding as the countdown began. "Are you sure about this?" a voice crackled through the intercom, his assistant, Maya, nervously watching from behind the reinforced glass. "We've run the calculations 100 times, Adrian replied, stepping onto the platform. The temporal gateway was his life's work, a machine designed to transport objects through time. But today, for the first time, a human would make the journey. He took a deep breath as the last few seconds ticked away. 3, 2, 1. A blinding flash engulfed Adrian, and the world around him vanished. For a moment, there was nothing. No sound, no light, only an overwhelming sensation of being pulled through an endless void. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the force released him. Adrian hit the ground hard, gasping for air. He was outside. A cold wind howled through the air. He struggled to his feet, his vision still blurry from the jump. His hands trembled as he took in his surroundings. What should have been the gleaming skyline of the city was instead a wasteland of broken towers and crumbling buildings. The sky was a dull shade of gray, heavy with thick clouds that blotted out the sun. The streets were cracked and overgrown with vines, as if nature had begun reclaiming the land. Cars lay abandoned, their frames rusted and shattered. This wasn't right. Adrian had set the machine for a precise jump, exactly 100 years into the future. But instead of progress, he had found devastation. His breathing quickened. "Maya? Do you copy?" he asked, tapping the small communicator embedded in his suit. Static. Panic set in. Then, a sound. A low, guttural moan echoed through the air. Adrian turned sharply, scanning the street. At first, he saw nothing. But then, movement in the shadows. A figure stumbled from behind a wrecked car. Its clothes were tattered, its skin pale and decayed. The stench of rot filled the air. And its eyes, milky white, devoid of life, locked onto him. Adrian stepped back. The figure groaned louder, its mouth opening to reveal jagged, yellowed teeth. Then, with a sudden jerk, it lunged forward. Adrian barely had time to react. He spun on his heel, sprinting in the opposite direction. More movement. From alleyways and ruined buildings, others began to emerge, dozens of them, their ragged bodies shambling toward him with terrifying hunger. "What the hell is this?" he gasped, his mind struggling to process the nightmare unfolding before him. His foot caught on debris, sending him crashing to the pavement. Pain flared in his elbow, but there was no time to dwell on it. The creatures were getting closer. Their grotesque moans filled the air, growing louder with each agonizing second. Adrian scrambled to his feet, adrenaline pushing him forward. His eyes darted wildly, searching for an escape. A building, partially collapsed but still standing, loomed ahead. Its doors were torn from their hinges, but it was his only chance. He dashed inside, the foul stench of decay assaulting his senses. His boots crunched over shattered glass and broken bones. He didn't stop. Racing up the stairs, he reached the second floor and ducked into a nearby room. Silence. His chest heaved as he pressed his back against the wall, trying to steady his breathing. He peeked through a gap in the door. The creatures had followed, their uneven steps echoing through the hollow building. Adrian clenched his fists. His heart pounded in his chest as realization dawned on him. This wasn't just a ruined city. This was an extinction event. The world he knew was gone. And he was trapped in the future. Adrian remained motionless, his back pressed against the wall of the abandoned building. Outside, the undead roamed the streets, their hollow groans echoing in the silence. His mind raced. This wasn't just a failed experiment, he had traveled a century into a nightmare. Slowly, he peeked through a crack in the door. The creatures were still searching, their decayed bodies moving in an unnatural, jerky motion. Some sniffed the air, their heads twitching in odd angles as if sensing his presence. He held his breath. Minutes passed. Then, finally, the undead began to lose interest, shuffling aimlessly back into the ruins of the city. Adrian exhaled sharply, but the relief was short-lived. He couldn't stay here forever. If he wanted to survive, he needed information. What had happened to the world? Was there anyone left alive? More importantly, could he find a way back? He cautiously stepped out of the room, moving down the ruined corridor. Dust and debris coated the floor, and the walls were smeared with old, dried blood. Bullet holes riddled the walls, a sign that someone had fought here once. But clearly, they had lost. At the end of the hall, Adrian found a stairwell. He moved carefully, listening for any sounds of movement. The building, though partially collapsed, had once been a commercial skyscraper. If he could get to the roof, he might be able to see what lay beyond the wreckage. The climb was slow. Every step felt like it could bring the entire structure crashing down. But after what felt like an eternity, he reached the top. What he saw stole the breath from his lungs. The city stretched before him, a graveyard of human civilization. Skyscrapers, once towering symbols of progress, were now skeletal ruins. Roads were split open, consumed by nature. Fires burned in the distance, black smoke curling into the gray sky. And the dead. They were everywhere. Hundreds, no, thousands, of them moved through the streets below, a sea of rotting bodies. Some aimlessly wandered, while others stood still, waiting, as if listening for something. The air was thick with the stench of decay. Adrian swallowed hard. This wasn't just a disaster. It was extinction. He turned, scanning the horizon for anything useful. That's when he spotted it, a structure far in the distance, untouched by destruction. A fortress-like building surrounded by walls, with what looked like lights still flickering inside. A sign of life. His heart pounded. If there were survivors, maybe they had answers. Maybe they knew what had happened. Maybe they even had a way to fix this. But getting there. That was another challenge entirely. A sudden noise snapped him back to reality. From below, a crash echoed through the building. Adrian froze. He wasn't alone. Someone, or something, was in here with him. Adrian's pulse quickened as the crash echoed through the ruined building. He pressed himself against the stairwell wall, ears straining. The undead outside had been aimless, but this noise, this felt deliberate. Someone, or something, was inside. Slowly, he descended the stairs, his steps careful to avoid loose debris. His eyes darted around the shadows, every dark corner a potential hiding place for danger. Then, another sound, closer this time. A scraping noise, followed by heavy breathing. Adrian turned a corner, heart pounding. And that's when he saw her. A woman crouched behind a toppled desk, clutching a rusted pipe. Her clothes were torn, her face streaked with dirt and dried blood. But her eyes, sharp, calculating, locked onto him with suspicion. "Who the hell are you?" she hissed, tightening her grip on the pipe. Adrian hesitated. He hadn't seen another living person since arriving. Relief washed over him, but he knew better than to let his guard down. "My name is Adrian," he said cautiously. I'm not from here." The woman snorted. "No one's from here anymore." She edged closer, her posture tense, ready to strike if he made the wrong move. Adrian kept his hands where she could see them. "I mean it. He paused, considering how insane the truth would sound. "I got here by accident. I don't even know what year it is." The woman's brow furrowed. "You don't know," she stopped herself, shaking her head. "It's 2124. 100 years." He had been right. Before he could process the weight of that reality, the woman gestured sharply. "Move. Now." Adrian didn't argue. She led him deeper into the building, past makeshift barricades and faded warning signs. They entered what had once been a conference room, now converted into a crude shelter. The windows were boarded up, a small lantern flickering on a dusty table. The woman grabbed a canteen, taking a long drink before tossing it to him. "Drink." Adrian caught it and hesitated. She could be lulling him into a false sense of security. But thirst won out. The water was stale but clean. He drank greedily. She crossed her arms. So, Adrian, who's not from here, tell me the truth. Where did you come from? He lowered the canteen. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Try me. Adrian inhaled. I'm from the year 2024. I'm a scientist. I built a machine, an experiment with time travel. Something went wrong, and now I'm here. Silence. Then, she burst out laughing. Adrian's face burned. I'm serious. Oh, I believe you, she said between chuckles. Because that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, and in this world? Dumb things tend to be true. Adrian blinked. Wait, you believe me? The woman smirked. I've seen weirder. Before he could ask what that meant, a deep, echoing howl sounded from the streets below. The woman's expression turned grim. Damn it. They heard us. Adrian's blood ran cold. Who heard us? The woman grabbed a worn-out backpack and slung it over her shoulder. The real monsters, she muttered. And trust me, you don't want to meet them. She pulled open a trapdoor in the corner, revealing a dark tunnel below. You want to survive? She asked. Adrian nodded. Then follow me. Without hesitation, she dropped into the darkness. Adrian swallowed his fear and jumped in after her. To be continued. Adrian landed hard in the tunnel, dust swirling around him as his feet hit solid ground. The air was damp, carrying the scent of mildew and rot. He turned to find the woman already moving ahead, her silhouette barely visible in the dim light. Keep up, she whispered. We don't have much time. Adrian hurried after her, his mind racing. He had traveled 100 years into the future, found the world in ruins, and now he was running for his life with a woman who seemed to know far more than she let on. They moved quickly through the underground passage, the walls lined with rusted pipes and old maintenance panels. What is this place? Adrian asked. Old sewer system, she replied. Safer than the streets. Most of the dead don't come down here. Most? She shot him a look but didn't answer. As they navigated through the tunnels, distant howls echoed from above. Adrian's stomach twisted. These weren't the moans of the shambling undead he had seen before, these were something else. What was that? He asked. The woman hesitated. You're really not from around here, are you? No. She exhaled sharply. Those aren't regular zombies. We call them hunters. They're faster, smarter, and a lot harder to kill. Adrian's throat went dry. Zombies that hunt? They weren't always like this, she continued. Something changed them. No one knows how, but now they hunt in packs. They track you. And when they do, she didn't finish the sentence. A sudden thud interrupted them. They both froze. It had come from above. Then another. Something was moving, fast. Run, the woman hissed. Without hesitation, Adrian bolted after her. The tunnel twisted and turned, each step splashing through shallow water. Behind them, the thudding grew louder. Then came the screeches, high-pitched, unnatural. Adrian risked a glance back. A dark shape dropped into the tunnel behind them, its long, bony limbs twitching unnaturally. Its eyes glowed faintly in the dark, locking onto them with terrifying precision. Oh, hell no, Adrian gasped, pushing himself to run faster. Left, the woman yelled. They turned sharply, slipping through a narrow passage. The hunter behind them shrieked in fury but kept coming. It was fast. Too fast. Adrian's lungs burned as they reached a metal ladder. The woman didn't slow down. She grabbed the rungs and climbed. Hurry! Adrian scrambled up after her, the hunter's claws scraping the metal below. He could hear it breathing, deep, ragged, hungry. The woman reached the top first, shoving open a rusted grate. She hauled herself through and reached down for Adrian. He grabbed her hand just as something cold and sharp grazed his ankle. With one last desperate pull, he tumbled onto the surface. The woman slammed the grate shut, locking it with a heavy chain. Adrian lay on his back, gasping for air. That was too close. The woman smirked. Welcome to the future. He sat up, taking in their surroundings. They were outside the city now, on a cracked highway leading toward the distant walled structure he had seen earlier. The woman stood, adjusting her backpack. We need to move. We're not safe yet. Adrian pushed himself to his feet. I don't even know your name. She hesitated, then extended a hand. Call me Raven. He shook it. All right, Raven. What now? She glanced toward the distant fortress. Now, she said, we find out if there's still hope left in this world. Adrian and Raven moved cautiously along the cracked highway, the ruins of the dead city looming behind them. The distant fortress, their only hope, stood surrounded by high metal walls, its faint lights flickering against the darkening sky. Adrian's legs ached, but he pushed forward. What is that place? He asked. Raven kept her eyes ahead. Sanctuary. Or at least, that's what the rumors say. You've never been there? No, her voice was guarded. No one gets in without proving they're worth the risk. Adrian frowned. Risk? She stopped abruptly and turned to him. The last time someone let strangers in, the infected followed. It cost them everything. Adrian swallowed hard. He hadn't considered that survivors might not be welcoming. We have to be careful, Raven continued. They'll shoot first if they think we're a threat. Adrian's stomach twisted. As if zombies weren't bad enough, now they had to worry about trigger-happy survivors. They kept moving, the city ruins giving way to open wasteland. The remains of old highways stretched endlessly, littered with rusted-out cars and skeletons of the past. The silence was eerie. Then, Adrian noticed something odd. Do you hear that? Raven stopped. Hear what? That's the problem. Nothing. No wind, no birds, no. A gunshot rang out. Adrian barely had time to react before Raven tackled him behind an overturned car. A second shot struck the pavement inches from his head. Snipers, Raven hissed. I told you they don't trust outsiders. Adrian's heart pounded. So, what do we do? We show them we're not a threat. Raven slowly raised her hands, stepping out from behind cover. We're not infected, she shouted. We need help. Silence. Then, a voice crackled over an unseen speaker. Drop your weapons. Raven hesitated. She had a knife strapped to her thigh, the only thing keeping her from being defenseless. But after a moment, she unclipped it and tossed it aside. Adrian raised his hands as well. We're just trying to survive, he called out. A long pause. Then, footsteps. From the shadows, armed guards emerged, their rifles trained on them. Their faces were obscured by helmets and gas masks, making them look more like machines than men. One of them, taller than the rest, stepped forward. Who are you? Raven's jaw tightened. Call me Raven. He's Adrian. The leader studied them, then motioned toward the fortress. Come with us. But if you so much as twitch the wrong way, he lifted his rifle. You won't live to regret it. Adrian exchanged a nervous glance with Raven. This was their last hope. But had they just walked into something worse? To be continued. Adrian and Raven walked cautiously behind the armed guards, their hands still raised. The massive steel gates of the fortress loomed ahead, covered in layers of rust and reinforced metal plating. The eerie silence was only broken by the occasional static from the guards' radios. As they approached, a loud mechanical hum filled the air. The gates groaned and began to slide open, revealing a long tunnel lined with spotlights. Adrian squinted at the sudden brightness. The world inside the walls was about to be revealed. The guards ushered them forward, weapons still raised. As soon as they crossed the threshold, the gates slammed shut behind them with a thunderous clang. Adrian inhaled sharply as he took in the sight before him. The fortress wasn't just some crumbling safe house, it was a full-blown settlement. Rows of makeshift buildings stretched into the distance, constructed from salvaged metal, wood, and debris. People, actual, living people, moved through the streets, some carrying supplies, others tending to small gardens. Children played in a fenced-off area while a group of workers reinforced the perimeter with sharpened barricades. For the first time since arriving in this nightmare, Adrian felt something close to hope. Raven, however, remained tense. "I don't trust this," she muttered. The lead guard motioned for them to follow. "You'll meet the commander. He decides who stays and who doesn't." They were led through the settlement, past watchtowers and makeshift armories, before reaching the central building, a heavily fortified structure that looked like it had once been a military bunker. The doors swung open, and they were pushed inside. The interior was stark and dimly lit, with maps and weapons lining the walls. At the far end of the room, behind a large steel desk, sat a man with graying hair and sharp, calculating eyes. His uniform was patched together from old military gear, giving him an air of authority. The guard saluted. "Commander Darius, we found these two approaching the gates." Darius leaned forward, studying Adrian and Raven carefully. His gaze lingered on Adrian's clean clothes, clearly different from the tattered garments most survivors wore. "You don't look like you belong here," Darius said. "Where did you come from?" Adrian hesitated. How could he possibly explain? "It's complicated." Darius's eyes narrowed. "Try me." Adrian glanced at Raven, who gave him a barely perceptible nod. Taking a deep breath, he said, "I'm not from this time. I built a machine, a time travel experiment. Something went wrong, and now I'm here, 100 years later." Silence. Then, laughter. Not from Darius, but from the guards around the room. One of them chuckled. "That's the craziest lie I've heard all year." Darius, however, didn't laugh. His expression remained unreadable. He leaned back in his chair, tapping his fingers against the desk. "You're either the worst liar I've ever met," he said, "or the most interesting person I've come across in a long time." Adrian swallowed hard. "I'm telling the truth." Darius studied him for a long moment before standing. "Truth or not, it doesn't matter. What matters is whether you're useful." He turned to Raven. "And you? What's your story?" Raven crossed her arms. "I survived." Darius smirked. "Fair enough." He motioned to one of the guards. "Take them to the holding area. We'll figure out what to do with them later." Before Adrian could protest, rough hands grabbed his arms and shoved him forward. As they were led away, Raven muttered under her breath, "Told you I didn't trust this place." Adrian's stomach churned. They had made it inside the fortress. But were they any safer than before? Adrian and Raven were escorted through a maze of narrow hallways, each more claustrophobic than the last. The air inside the fortress felt dense, heavy with the scent of sweat and metal. Every step they took seemed to echo through the silence, and the sound of their boots against the cold concrete floor was the only thing that broke the stillness. Finally, they were shoved into a small, dimly lit room at the end of a corridor. The door slammed shut behind them with a metallic clang. A thin mattress lay in the corner of the room, the only piece of furniture. The walls were bare except for the faint outlines of old drawings, probably left by previous occupants. Adrian exhaled slowly, rubbing the back of his neck. "Well, this is great," he muttered. Raven didn't answer immediately. She stood by the window, peering through the rusted bars at the distant city skyline. Her silhouette was barely visible in the shadowed room, but Adrian could tell she was deep in thought. "You know," Adrian said, his voice tinged with frustration, "we're supposed to be safe now. At least, that's what I thought when we got in here." Raven's voice was low. "This place isn't as safe as you think." Adrian frowned. "What do you mean?" She turned to face him, her eyes hard. "Darius." He's not just some leader, he's hiding something. Something bigger than any of us realize. Adrian raised an eyebrow. What are you talking about? Raven stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. There are rumors. Whispers among the survivors. Darius isn't just holding people here for protection. He's using them. Experimenting on them. And the worst part? The hunters, they're not just zombies. They're a product of his experiments. Adrian's stomach turned. Wait, what? You're saying he created them? Raven nodded grimly. He's been trying to weaponize the infection. He thinks if he can control it, he'll have an army. But, that's insane. Adrian exclaimed. He's turning people into monsters. I know. And there's more. Darius has been stockpiling resources, but it's not just to keep his people alive. He's looking for something he believes will fix everything. She paused, her gaze narrowing. And I think it's connected to you. Adrian felt a cold shiver run down his spine. Me? How? Raven didn't answer right away. She turned back toward the window, her mind clearly racing. Darius mentioned your machine. And I think he believes you can fix this. Bring the world back. But I don't know if he wants you to do that for the right reasons. Adrian swallowed hard. You think he's using me? Raven finally faced him again, her expression unreadable. I think Darius will do anything to keep his power. And if you're the key to his plans, you'll be a pawn in his game. Adrian's mind reeled. All this time, he thought his arrival in this nightmare world was some kind of accident. But what if it wasn't? What if he had been brought here for a reason far darker than he could ever have imagined? A sudden, sharp knock on the door broke his thoughts. Raven tensed, and Adrian's heart skipped a beat. Time's up, a voice called from outside the door. You're meeting the commander. The door swung open before either of them could react. Two guards stood in the doorway, their eyes cold and unblinking. Get moving, one of them ordered. Raven shot Adrian a look that told him everything he needed to know. This was it. Whatever happened next, they had to be ready. Adrian's mind raced as he followed the guards down the darkened hallways, the weight of Raven's words pressing heavily on his chest. Was he really the key to Darius's plan? Was he going to be used to play God in a world already torn apart by the undead? They reached the same bunker-like room they had been in before, where Darius was waiting. He was no longer behind the desk, instead, he stood by a large map, his eyes scanning the layout of the city. He looked up as they entered. Sit, he commanded, motioning to the chairs in front of him. Adrian and Raven sat across from Darius, their eyes never leaving his. I've been thinking about your story, Darius began, his voice calm but intense. And I think you're telling the truth. About the machine. About time travel. Adrian's pulse quickened. But, Darius continued, you're going to help us fix this. You're going to help me build an army. Adrian's throat tightened. I won't help you create more monsters. Darius leaned forward, his gaze locking onto Adrian's. You don't have a choice. Adrian's heart pounded in his chest as Darius's words hung in the air, thick with threat and conviction. He felt the weight of the command, the pressure of the choice before him, but there was something in Darius's eyes, a cold, calculating gleam, that made Adrian's skin crawl. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about power. You don't understand, Adrian said, his voice shaking with a mixture of anger and fear. What you're asking me to do, no one should have that kind of power. Not after what happened. Raven's hand tightened into a fist beside him, but she didn't speak. She understood the gravity of the situation all too well. Darius smiled darkly. It's not about what should happen. It's about what must happen if we want to survive. I've seen what's out there, those hunters, the undead, the chaos. It won't stop unless we can control it. And you, Adrian, have the key to turning the tide. Adrian felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. He wasn't just in the future. He was in a broken world where people were willing to sacrifice everything for power, even humanity itself. "I'm not doing it," Adrian said firmly, though the uncertainty in his voice betrayed his resolve. Darius's face hardened, his eyes narrowing with frustration. He stood up abruptly, walking around the table as if pondering his next move. The guards by the door tensed, their fingers twitching on the triggers of their weapons. "You don't have a choice," Darius said quietly, his voice almost a whisper. "You'll help me. One way or another." Adrian stood up, his chair scraping across the floor. "I will never be your puppet." Raven stood beside him, a defiant look on her face. "And if we refuse?" she asked, her voice icy. Darius turned slowly to face them, the silence in the room stretching taut. For a moment, no one moved. The guards watched, their rifles still aimed but unmoving. Darius's lips curled into a small, cruel smile. "I'll make you a deal," he said, his voice calm but dripping with malice. "You do what I say, and you can live. You resist, and I'll make sure the hunters find you. But if you're lucky, maybe I'll let you go out the way you came in, with the same hope you came with." Empty. Adrian's mind raced. He thought of everything he had been through to get here, the experiments, the lost world, the lives destroyed, and he knew that giving in to Darius's demands would only mean more suffering, for him and for the rest of the survivors. He had to find another way. As Darius turned to leave, Raven suddenly spoke, her voice low and calculating. "There's one thing you haven't considered." Darius stopped in his tracks and looked back at her. "And what's that?" Raven stepped forward, her eyes locked on Darius's. "You're not the only one who knows how to manipulate time." Adrian blinked, his breath catching in his chest. "What are you talking about?" Raven didn't take her eyes off Darius. "You've been so focused on using Adrian for your experiments, you didn't realize that there might be another way out of this mess. I've been watching you closely, Commander. You've been gathering people, yes. But you've also been gathering knowledge, haven't you?" Darius's expression faltered for a brief moment, and in that split second, Adrian realized something. Raven knew more than she had been letting on. She had a plan. Raven continued, her voice growing steadier with each word. "The world is broken, Darius. But it's not beyond saving. You don't need to turn everyone into monsters to have control. You can fix this, but it won't be with fear. It will be with cooperation." Darius scoffed. "Cooperation? In this world? You're a fool if you think that will ever happen." "I'm not a fool," Raven retorted. "But I'm tired of seeing good people suffer because of men like you. So here's the deal, if you want control, you'll have to let go of your greed. We can work together to fix this, or you can continue down this path of destruction, and you'll see firsthand what happens when you push people too far." The tension in the room thickened. Adrian could feel his heartbeat echoing in his ears as he waited for Darius's response. Would he see reason, or would he turn further into the tyrant Raven warned him about? Darius stood motionless for a long time, his eyes searching Raven's face, as if trying to gauge whether she was bluffing. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and filled with an unsettling calmness. "I think you overestimate your position," he said. "But I'll give you one chance. Help me with my experiments, or I will find another way to make you. Your choice." Raven's face was resolute. "We'll find another way." Without another word, Darius turned and walked out of the room, leaving Adrian and Raven standing together in the silence. Adrian looked at Raven, his mind still reeling from the weight of everything that had just happened. "You are serious about manipulating time?" Raven nodded, her gaze unwavering. "I don't know exactly how yet, but I will find a way to fix this. Together, we can stop him." Adrian took a deep breath. There was no turning back now. "We will," he said, his voice filled with newfound resolve. Together, they had one final chance to save this broken world. But they would have to move quickly. And this time, they couldn't afford to make any more mistakes. The end.